Before we do get started, I want to go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Jamie Dufek. I am one of our event partnership directors here at NCSA, Next College Student Athlete. I've actually been with NCSA. It'll be, 10 years this June. But I am a former Division One athlete. I am heavily involved in managing our relationship and partnership with USA Water Polo, and wanted to take a just quick minute to not only thank USA Water Polo, but thank the USA Water Polo team just for their amazing partnership and allowing myself and Abby to come on tonight to talk with you all and better prepare you for this weekend. And really, honestly, the next few months and into summer, as you guys are going to continue competing. But some of you guys might be asking yourself, who is NCSA? We are Next College Student Athlete. We are the largest and most trusted resource when it comes to athletic recruiting. And we are actually the official recruiting partner of USA Water Polo. NCSA actually offers over 37 men's and women's sports, and we work with 40,000 plus college coaches across those sports. You guys can see all of the stats on the slide here. I won't get into all of those details, but what I will get into is introducing Miss Abby Vermeer, who is my fantastic co-host tonight. Abby actually works on our Team Edition side, so she works with youth coaches on Team Edition, which is a product that we offer for youth coaches. But Abby is actually a former water polo player herself and current club coach. So, Abby, do you want to share with the group a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. And so most of you guys know the Midwest isn't the big, hub of water polo. I played college water polo, and then I started the first all girls water polo club in St. Louis. I now coach boys high school water polo and swimming. And I'm coming up on my 1-year anniversary at NCSA. And like Jamie said, I work on our Team Edition side, where we do sort of like team memberships. So like if cool, St. Louis water polo.
Small world, I'm telling you.
We do so we do sort of team memberships. So I work with coaches who are looking for memberships for your whole team. So if you guys have, other teammates that like choose NCSA, or you think your coach would be interested, that's kind of what I do. I'm the director of client services for them.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing your background. I'm really excited to tap into your knowledge and your experience. I always like to kick off our webinars just letting you guys know that we want to be very conversational. Not only are we going to be providing really great education pieces tonight, but we also want this to be interactive. So if any of you guys have any questions, if you want to use the chat box for any comments, whatever it may be, I'll make sure that I'm checking in here. We will have a Q&A at the end as well too. So whatever floats your boat as far as timing of all of that, feel free to use the chat box. But I did see a few others just kind of jump in the last few minutes. So just a few reminders before we jump right in. Be ready to take notes. So type any questions that you have in the chat box, or there is a Q&A function through Zoom. So I'll also get pinged on any of those. And then we're ready to rock and roll. So really what's on tonight's recruiting game plan, i.e. our agenda, is we are going to be going through and we're going to be talking about academics and eligibility. We're going to be talking about the athletic recruiting timeline. So we're going to provide you all with some reminders that are very important as you head into this weekend and as you continue through the next few months of competition and through the summer as well. We're going to talk a little bit about gaining exposure to college coaches and how you can utilize what we learned tonight and how you can apply that specifically to this weekend. But most importantly, following up after the tournament as well too. We'll touch base on some next steps in recruiting, and then we will have a Q&A at the end. So what I always like to start with is academics. And the reason behind that is because academics is the foundation, right? Abby, you were a former D2 water polo player. How much did your parents preach academics when you were going through your recruiting process?
Yeah, so I even was talking to my college coach last summer as I was, talking to my players about recruiting and all that. And I was like, so what, like, if you're getting an email from a incoming or not, like, a high school student looking to be recruited, blah, 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 what's like the first thing you need to know? Or like, what information do you want in that email? He's like, well, you have to know their academic status as far as like GPA, you, depending on the school, you might need to know like ACT, SAT stuff, but GPA, he's like, if they don't have the GPA to be eligible, we really, there's nothing a coach can do as far as moving forward in the recruiting process, because if the GPA isn't eligible for what the school is looking for, the coach can't really like override that or do anything. So
Absolutely.
that's really like the first piece of information that they're looking for as far as like, are you someone we want to recruit or not?
Yeah, and we're going to talk about it here in the next few minutes. Ways to research programs, ahead of time. And I would even take it a step further too, Abby. I think it's so important for you guys as athletes, but even more important, as mom and dad that may be helping through this process as well too, is when you're researching college programs, understanding what their baselines are. What are those baseline minimums? The school might have an academic baseline, but the athletic program may honestly have a little bit more strict or stringent, academic requirements as well too. So just keep that in mind. We'll talk more on the research side, but for those that maybe are not super familiar with the NCAA Eligibility Center, they've put out a really great resource in regards to a high school timeline. And so I realize that some of you may be eighth grade, ninth graders. Some of you guys might be, on the back half of your recruiting process as a junior or senior. So I wanted to share this visual selfishly enough so that you guys will have it post webinar tonight too, so that you can really make sure that you are on track academically. So as we've talked about it, eighth grade, ninth grade year, guys, you're really setting the stage for your academics. Everything that you tackle that first year is going to set the stage for how the rest of high school is going to go. If you're really digging yourself in a hole that freshman year, it's going to be really hard to get yourself out of that come sophomore, junior, senior year. So I want to challenge you all, especially if you're underclassmen here, to really think about setting that stage and really setting that baseline. So ninth grade is all about starting to plan now, really understanding what your NCAA approved core classes are through your high school. You have the opportunity to go ahead and sign up for a profile page through the NCAA Eligibility Center as well. And then as we transition to 10th grade, they're recommending that you register with the NCAA Eligibility Center. And so this is really where you're keeping yourself honest. So you're making sure that you're not falling behind academically. You're in touch with your counselors so they can help you find those approved core classes and such to take. You're making sure that you've registered for that profile page through the eligibilitycenter.org website. And then you're really going to monitor your next steps in that process. Where things really, guys, get heightened and kick it up a notch is going to be 11th grade year, right? Junior year. So this is going to be where we're really doubling down. We're really focusing in on those SAT, ACT, test scores. There might be some of you that are the exception to the rule and may look at taking your test scores or having a baseline sophomore year to see where you're at. That's not uncommon for those that may be looking Ivy League or high academics to really understand kind of where you're at, on the spectrum. So don't feel like this is the holy grail. Again, this is kind of a guide and they call it a timeline, for a reason. But 11th grade year, you're also making sure that you are filling out all of that sports participation information. So basically through the eligibility center is you're creating an account and you're adding in that information little by little as you're transitioning through your high school career. At the end of your junior year, you should be asking your counselor in order for them to go ahead and send off an official transcript. So typically junior year, you're going to have enough of your core classes in so that it could be sent off to the eligibility center. They can make sure that you're on track with everything and they're going to be able to monitor that. And then when we go ahead and we transition to senior year, this is really where you're competing your final NCAA core classes. If you need to, or you're working on getting SAT, ACT scores up, you have that opportunity and you have that potential wiggle room. But really, this is the end goal, right? You're requesting your final amateurism certificate. This will be specifically in the spring semester of your senior year. And then once you're graduated, there's one final official transcript that's sent off. Keep in mind that if you are looking at the D1, D2 level, the Eligibility Center is a must for you to register with. If you know right now you're an athlete that really is focused in on the NCAA Division III level, then you do not need to register. You do not need to pay that fee with the Eligibility Center. If you're one of those that's on the cusp or, you're one of those bubble players and you're not really sure, my recommendation is always playing the safe route because you're better safe than sorry of registering and you can figure things out from there. But if you are looking to compete at the D1 or D2 level, you do need to register with the Eligibility Center. Abby and I wanted to talk a little bit about just some baselines and some academic minimums, both at the NCAA Division One, Division Two, Division Three levels, just because we think this is very important. Again, this is a great way to make sure that you guys are staying on track with everything as well. So for the NCAA level, Division One, you need a minimum GPA of a 2.3. So if you want to think of Michael Jordan's number 23, 2.3 is that magic number there. Anyone from Chicago Bulls, hopefully you got hopefully you got that reference. But you need 16 core courses as well too. If you're not familiar with what a core course is, it is your English, it is your math, it is your physical science, social science. Those are all considered core classes. There is actually a link through the NCAA Eligibility Center where you can look at all of the core classes by your high school and what is offered. So if you're not familiar with that, or if you have not had a chance to talk with your guidance counselor on this already, I strongly encourage you guys, okay? Excuse me. You do need to complete 10 core courses before the start of your 7th semester. So that would be the start of your senior year. And then you do need to earn an SAT combined score or an ACT sum score that matches the core course GPA. So through the NCAA level, they do actually, D1 level, I should say, they operate off of a sliding scale along with the D2 level. So you guys can go ahead and screenshot this. You will have the PowerPoint as well too post webinar, so you'll have access to this. But this is a really, really great resource to have, because why I say this is the trick to remember is the higher GPA you have, the lower minimum SAT or ACT scores you need. The lower GPA you have, vice versa, you're going to need higher test scores in order to meet that sliding scale requirements. So if you're not super familiar with this, or this is a new topic for you, I do encourage you to check through the NCAA Eligibility Center and some of the NCAA resources, because they can give you a better visual. This will also break down specifically by 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. What are those core courses that you should have? So it should be one within each. And then as a reminder, you need those 10 core courses before the start of your senior year as well too, okay? I want to take a pause here. There is a question. Cyrus asks, is it sufficient to register for an NCAA eligibility number, or is a profile page or certification account also required? Great question. Basically, what the profile page is doing, Cyrus, is it's a free profile. So that's not actually going to get you an NCAA eligibility number. In order for you to actually receive an NCAA eligibility number, you need to pay the registration fee and actually enroll with the NCAA Eligibility Center. So if you are looking to compete at the Division One or Division Two level, it is absolutely required. You must have an eligibility number. Like I said, if you're on that cusp, or maybe you're looking at some NAI programs, or maybe you want to go the junior college route, you do not necessarily need to register with them. Again, I always recommend it as a safety net. It's always good, to have that as a backup option there as well too. Great question though, Cyrus. Moving along here, sorry. For the NAI level, things to remember here. The NAI level, let me take a quick poll. If you guys can, in the chat box, just give me a quick yes or no. How many of you guys are familiar with the NAI level? Give me a quick yes or no. Oh, okay. Pretty evenly distributed. Abby, do you want to talk with them a little bit about the NAI level and how that kind of compares to the NCAA level?
Yeah, so well, I would say the interesting thing about water polo is it really depends, because it's sort of a different sport. It's not one of your, like volleyball, basketball, baseball, those type of sports. The division is like, they're your big Division One schools that are a really big program. But then there are also the Division One schools that are, just up and coming programs, or you could have a junior college. Actually, like in California, a lot of the junior colleges, they have really high level water polo, because that's the hub of water polo, and they get a lot of these athletes who might not be academically eligible to play somewhere, and then they go to junior colleges for 2 years and get recruited out of there. So the thing with water polo is there are actually a lot of different levels within
Mhm.
each division of the NCAA. It's not going to be like, oh, you're Division One, you're automatically super competitive and super,
Yeah.
it's not always going to be like that just because water polo is a little bit different. So you will what I would recommend as far as like the different levels. Sorry, I know this isn't really about NAI, but as far as the different levels, it's like I would try to find some of their games online from the past couple years, try to watch and just see like, okay, what level are we talking about? Because
Mhm.
there could be, a University of Michigan or some of the California schools that are Division One and like they are that top tier. But then I know there are a couple Division One schools that are like just starting out and they're
Mhm.
still
A
looking for people.
mid-tier. Yeah.
Right. And so or you could have a club team that can compete with, NCAA Division two teams. It really depends on the specific school and kind of where they're at. So I wouldn't necessarily, my kind of advice would be not to necessarily rule something out for yourself. Like, oh, I could never do that, or I would never want to do this, like I would never want to go play junior college, but because that could actually be like really competitive thing. And then a lot of people get recruited out of there as well. Or like, oh, I can never play Division One. It's like there are some, up and coming Division One programs as well. So
Yeah.
I just wouldn't rule anything out as far as um like what division. And then I would kind of watch some of their games and see, okay, like what level of water polo are we kind of talking here? So
That's a great point, and the biggest thing with the NAI level, you guys, is that it's just a separate governing body. So it's very athletically equivalent to like an NCAA Division two type level. They do offer scholarships. Academically, they are a little, I don't want to say a little bit more lenient, but there are less hoops to jump through, I will say. So in order for you to be academically eligible at an NAI program, you need to meet any of the two following requirements. So that's a minimum of a 2.0 GPA. You have to finish in the top half of your graduating class. You need a minimum of an 18 on the ACT, or a minimum of an 860 on the SAT. So if you want to think about the NCAA and the NAI, it's kind of like Pepsi and Coke, right? They're both offering athletic programs. They're just two different groups essentially. So for those that maybe aren't super familiar with the NAI, it does actually stand for the National Association of Intercollegiate Athletics. I never refer to it as that just because it's a tongue twister. I use the acronym NAI. But there are a lot of great opportunities. And over the next few minutes, we are going to go through the different breakdowns of different programs and such at each division level, what scholarship opportunities look like. So again, just a good academic reminder here for you at the NAI level. As we transition to the junior college, like Abby mentioned, there are a lot of junior college opportunities. They are referred to as the junior college, community college. Some refer to, them as the NJCAA. There is a group of junior colleges within California that is the CCCAA specifically. So these are two-year colleges. They can offer scholarships. And your academic requirements at the junior college level is you have to meet the following requirements for admission. So you have to have your high school diploma, you have to have a general education diploma or your GED, the State Department of Education approved high school equivalency test, and they do not require SAT or ACT scores. So again, there are options. The biggest thing that I will say too, as a former Division One athlete that went through the recruiting process, I actually played softball. I had great academics. I had a 3.8, 3.9 GPA, 26 ACT. I was looking at junior college opportunities from a financial aspect. And the other reason was is I wanted to play right away. So I know sometimes there is a stigma with two-year programs or junior colleges that they may only be for those that aren't academically qualified or whatever it may be. It's not always the case. Kind of getting back to your point that you've mentioned, Abby, when you're looking at the competitive nature of each program, I challenge you guys to think about the school for the school, right? Every program's going to, be involved in a division level and a conference, but every school is going to be a little bit different, as far as what their expectations are and, the type of program that they run. So I don't always necessarily, want you guys to get wrapped up in things, to Abby's point. It's always super important to kind of take into consideration the school for the school. Okay. So next, moving on, we want to talk a little bit about the athletic recruiting timeline. So Before I let Abby kind of talk through some of the dates and stuff to be aware of at each division level, these are some of the core dates that you should be aware of. So 13 years old. In order for you to be able to work with NCSA or have an athletic recruiting profile via NCSA, you need to be 13 years and older. Day one of freshman year, we talked about starting that baseline strong. Day one of freshman year, you're hitting the ground running academically. That is setting the stage for everything else that is to come. Researching schools, making sure you're keeping up with your studies. What you do on day one of freshman year is really going to have an effect for you over the next few years, right? Not always necessarily make or break. I don't want to scare you all, but it is really important, that you are taking things seriously and that we are really keeping in mind that day one of freshman year has the opportunity to kind of shape things for you. Okay. And then as we go through some of these dates specifically for some of the different division levels, June 15th is a hot one. So June 15th after sophomore year is going to be a big date for you guys to keep in mind moving forward. With that being said, we wanted to share a little bit about just general recruiting timelines and kind of what does the water polo recruiting process look like, both for male and females. So, Abby, do you want to touch a little bit on this compared to, you work with multiple, different sports at NCSA and youth coaches. How does water polo kind of, stack up against other sports and kind of their timelines?
Yeah, you can see, and like sort of everything we're talking about, don't take this as like, this is like the only thing, because I mean I do have an athlete who she's a senior now and she's sort of still, talking to coaches. It just makes it a little bit more difficult as far as like, deadlines being passed for applications and stuff like that. So if you're interested in specific division levels or you think one might be more appropriate, then this will be your recruiting timeline as far as like when the coaches are going to be looking. Another thing that Jamie and I had talked about too is something you guys will want to know with like you'll this will be helpful as far as you know when coaches are going to be recruiting, when coaches are going to be specifically looking for people in your grade. But then also like be aware of when the men's season like, so if you're looking at a specific school, men's season is typically fall, women's season is in the spring, and so a lot of water polo recruiting is done over summer, so like at the Junior Olympics, stuff like that. Coaches might not always have as much time to go on trips and do recruiting in the school year, just because they are spending fall with their men's team, spring with their women's
Yeah.
team. So when looking at this schedule, keep that in mind as far as like Junior Olympics, stuff like that. Summer is a big for water polo. It's a big recruiting tool, especially if or season, especially if the coach is doing the coach of both the men's and the women's team, which a lot of them are.
That's a great point, Abby. And the other thing to kind of piggyback off of too is right when we start talking about researching schools and reaching out to programs, you want to be in tune with what's going on at the college level, right? You want to make sure that you understand what that program's going through and what part of the season, are they in as well. So that's a really great point, Abby, that you bring up. And what we want to transition to a little bit right now is we want to talk a little bit about dates to know. So, Abby, do you want to touch on a little bit of just what can athletes receive, freshman year, what type of materials? Why is June 15th kind of a big date, when it comes to phone calls and such?
Yeah, so like it says in the top one, like there's no timeline for when you guys can start doing your research on schools. What I would personally say to when you're looking into like doing your research on a school is like, do they have majors that look appealing to me? Because this when you're talking about a college for your education, that's about the rest of your life and not just like the 4 years there. So like when you have, the questionnaires online, a lot of the websites have questionnaires. When you're looking at all the non-athletic stuff, I would do your research on that. And that can tie into when you're talking to coaches like, hey, I saw you guys have this program and this is what I'm thinking about going into academically. I think this will be a really good fit. So there's no timeline on your guys' research that you can do. And research is sort of a daunting word, but you know what I mean, where you're really looking into, is this school, do I want to go to a big school or a small school? Do I want to go East Coast, West Coast? Like where do I want to be going? What's the non-athletic information that I can get on the school. And then June 15th after the sophomore year, that's big to know as far as when you can start, like when coaches can start contacting you as far as like getting recruited goes. And then August 1st of your junior year. So official visits, those are more pertinent when you're talking about Division 1 and Division 2. You get a limited amount of official visits versus unofficial. And official is more like you're going to be able to meet the team, meet the coach, the all like it's a more official sort of process than, hey, I'm just going to go see the school, walk around, talk to an academic counselor, that type of thing.
Yeah.
You can do visits and go look at a campus, and you can do all that kind of stuff when you want to. So
Yeah, it's a great point, Abby. And the other thing to highlight too is just how many of you guys know I use the word official. How many of you guys really know the difference between an unofficial and an official visit? Can anyone tell us? Feel free to use the chat box. Braden asks, what's the limit of official visits? 5 at the D1 level, Braden. But who could tell me what an official visit is? Who can tell me what an unofficial visit is? I'll give you guys a minute because I know you've got to type it in. I told you it was going to be interactive. I'm going to keep you guys on your toes.
no idea.
That's okay. Samuel, without proper sanctions. Close. I'll give it another minute. I'm glad you guys are on here so we could talk a little bit about it. 30 seconds. Get your last thoughts in. All right, time's up. The biggest difference between an unofficial visit and an official visit is Wyatt coming at the last minute. Official is paid for by the school. Yes. In so many words, Wyatt, you are correct. So basically, an official visit is a visit that you are taking. It has been scheduled. It is, planned out in advance, and the school is paying for a fraction of the visit or all of the visit. It could be travel, it could be meals, it could be lodging. Just know that I will say this, coming from a mid-major Division 1 program, there were not always endless budgets, right? So there were differences between us and the University of Alabama when it came to, what was paid for on an official visit. So just know that in order for it to be an official visit, any portion of that visit that is covered by the school does deem it official, okay? An unofficial visit does not take away the fact that you might be meeting with the team, like Abby said, or having lunch with the team or sitting down with the coach. Those can happen, again, August 1st as well, too. It doesn't mean it's any less, the program's any less interested in you or anything along those lines. It really is going to come down to what the program's budget looks like. So I've always taken into account that anytime you have an opportunity to sit down with a coaching staff, meet the team, have your family, meet the team and the coaching staff and really get down to the nitty-gritty types of things and what you're talking about, whether it's official or unofficial, it's always a good sign. So just keep that in mind moving forward. But shout out to you, Wyatt, for coming up strong with that answer. Some recruiting timelines to know at the D2 level, very similar as well. So camp brochures are very popular. You can receive those at any point in time. You can fill out recruiting questionnaires at any time. Coaches can send you recruiting questionnaires at any time. They could send you camp information, all that good stuff. June 15th, again, as I told you, was the golden date here. Phone calls, text messages, direct messages, and emails are all eligible. And then D2 gets a little different with their timeline. So at a D2 level, you can take an unofficial visit at any point in time. That means that you can actually meet with the coaching staff as well, too. The only restriction on is outside of a dead period. So you cannot take an unofficial or an official visit during a dead period. Second part of the quiz, who could tell me what a dead period is? Wyatt, I have a feeling you might know the answer to this one too. Going once, going twice. What's a dead period? Maxwell, close. Off season, not quite close. A dead period is basically any time that a coaching staff cannot have face-to-face communication with you. So a lot of the times we'll see dead periods for sports right around conventions. We'll see dead periods right around signing periods as well too. So basically, a dead period means that a coaching staff cannot have face to face communication with you during that dead period. They could still email you, they could still call you, providing all, rules are permitted there as well too. They just cannot have face to face communication with you. Okay. Close guys. Good guesses, Maxwell and Rick. As far as off campus contact for the D2 level, again, that June 15th after sophomore year. And then official visits are actually June 15th after sophomore year as well, too. Okay. And then kind of transitioning here to the D3 level. We'll talk a little bit about the NAI and JUCO level as well, too. But excuse me, for the D3 level here, again, anytime for camp brochures, recruiting questionnaires, all that good stuff. D3 is a little bit more lax as well when it comes to contact rules. So you can actually have communication with a D3 program as early as freshman year. So they can call, email, text. There's actually no restrictions. Unofficial visits you could take at any point in time. Off campus contact will begin after your sophomore year. And then official visits can actually start January 1st of your junior year. I will say this, official visits at the D3 level do tend to be a little bit more tricky just because recruiting budgets do tend to be much smaller potentially at the D3 level. Not to say that is not the case again at the D1, D2 level. Remember, we're talking about you want to take into consideration the school for the school. But at that D3 level, even if it is, a fraction of them paying for meals or some sort of travel, it will be considered an official visit. I don't have a slide for NAI and junior college, and the reason behind that is because both of those division levels are kind of like the wild, wild west when it comes to contact rules. There aren't a ton. They really both promote, the opportunities between building relationships between coaches and athletes, and so you can actually have communication with both of those division levels as early as your freshman year as well too. Okay. Any questions, guys, on contact rules before we go ahead and transition here? We don't have to talk too much about the sport breakdown between men's and women's, but Abby and I wanted to make sure that you guys had this as a visual to take home as well too. This will just give you the breakdown as far as the program offerings between D1, D2, D3, NAI, and junior college programs. So you can see that there actually are quite a few junior college programs between men's and women's, and so men's are just a little bit under that threshold of 100, and then women's are just over the threshold of 100. So just keep this in mind. And then as we transition into scholarship information, I'll let Abby talk a little bit about this, but the numbers to understand at the D1 and D2 level is there are 4.5 scholarships on the men's side, and then there are 8 scholarships on the women's side. Abby, do you want to talk a little bit or share with the group what an equivalency sport is and kind of how that, factors into the water polo community? Sorry, guys, I'm getting trigger happy with the mouse here.
Yeah, so basically like it says, it's like they only have a certain amount of scholarships that they can give. It's not like they, just have an endless amount. And so that's another reason I would say that academics are really important, is because if you're not one of those, well, one, I think it's really important that another reason why it's important to be early on the recruiting process, because if they have a certain amount of scholarships, and they, start making offers to this person, you want to be early on that and say, okay, like what kind of scholarships do you guys have to offer me? And then also, like I said, with academics, it's like there are at certain levels you are allowed to stack scholarships as well. So say you get $5,000 from playing water polo, but then you have a really high GPA, and they're like, hey, we'll give you another $5,000 for being great academically. You, at certain levels, you're able to stack those scholarships as well, meaning you would be able to get all $10,000 in scholarship. And so that's another reason that I would emphasize your academics so much as well, is just because a lot of times there are limited amount of scholarships. So you want to start talking to those coaches early, get in conversation with them and just be like, what, like, based on tuition, like what kind of scholarships do you guys have available as part of your team? They usually have a certain amount like per class that they can offer. And then, yeah, sometimes you're able, it depends on the division, but sometimes you're able to get academic ones as well, or just different, merit-based
Yeah.
scholarships, different, there are a lot of different scholarship options. And you can ask your coaches about that too. Say, what are the scholarship options like as far as like outside of athletics? So
Yeah,
yeah, you
great
have a lot
point,
of options.
Abby. As far as equivalency, the biggest thing is that there are two types of sports when it comes to competition. There's equivalency in head count sport. A head count sport would be like a basketball situation where it's a full ride or nothing. We do see a lot of sports like softball and water polo and other areas where they have the opportunity, like Abby alluded to break up scholarships. So that's where that 4.5 comes into play. You will probably very rarely see someone on a full athletic scholarship. A lot of it is going to be a mixture of merit based, academic based, athletic based. Now, there is a section on here, and I don't want this to be scary, where it says the Division three and the D1 Ivy League schools can only offer merit based scholarships. They do not offer athletic scholarships, but I will tell you there are ways to make up differences when it comes to academics, need based, endowments. There are things, excuse me, in scholarships that you don't have to pay back. So, as scary as that may read, I have actually dealt with athletes as well in the past that have gotten really great academic and financial aid packages at those level of programs that have been financially affordable for them as well and their family. So, don't rule that out. Again, I know it can sound scary that they can't offer the glorious athletic scholarship, but I will tell you there are ways that programs and universities and schools can get creative with financial aid packages. So keep that in mind. With that being said, a really great question came in on the academic side as far as test optional specifically. So the biggest thing with test optional is there are a lot of schools that have gone to test optional, which means that they do not require SAT or ACT scores for applicants. While that is the case, you do need to keep in mind that if you are going to be competing at a D1, D2 NAI level, you will still need test scores. So while it's very appealing and it may help in the admission process, it does not necessarily mean that you will not be taking those. The other thing that I will also throw out there is that just because the school is test optional does not mean that, if you have a great SAT or ACT score, that it's not going to help you at all. When we're talking about academics, for a lot of scholarship opportunities, some of the differences between scholarships could be a point or two on a test score. And I mean, we could be talking about a few $1,000s as far as scholarship money. So I would not get so excited about SAT, ACT test optional. While it's great, and it definitely will help with the admission process, there are still things on the back end that do help, if you've got a great SAT or ACT score, or if it's something, that you're striving for as well too. So great question. Keep that in mind though. I think we had another question come through here. Christine asked, how do I find out if the school is a high, mid, or low level program? Great question, Christine. Through NCSA, we do actually have technology that will give you a breakdown as far as where that school is kind of ranking up within each division level as well. Some of it really just depends on, the different rankings and where they're, finishing out year in and year out within their competition and their conferences as well too. But if you are looking for more specifics, NCSA does offer that type of technology, excuse me, that will give you the academic information on each school, kind of give you the competition level as well. So happy to answer anything, Christine, post webinar if you've got more questions on that too. Okay.
And then this other question, it says, where can we locate a complete list of all the colleges that have a men's D1, D2, or D3 water polo programs? NCSA website actually has that. If you Google men's Division 1 water polo programs, or just look at NCSA, will probably be the first thing that comes up, because they have a comprehensive list of every single level and every single school that has water polo at that level.
Yep, absolutely. And a lot of this information, you guys, that Abby and I are talking about is free as well too. So we're going to make sure we get you guys some really great resources post webinar as well. Kristen, SAT, ACT for D1, D2 schools, that has to do with the NCAA Eligibility Center. So they're deeming your athlete academically eligible to compete at that level. So make sure you check out the NCAA Eligibility Center info that we shared, and along with those sliding scales. So keep that in mind, okay? Great question though. So as we talk a little bit about gaining exposure to college coaches, right? We've set that base with the academics. We've kind of given you guys some information and the ins and outs of the recruiting timeline and information and dates to be aware of. So ideally here, we're trying to set you up for success to really put your best foot forward as you're going to be putting yourself in front of these college programs. So with all that being said, the biggest thing is having an online athletic resume. And the really great thing is that via our partnership with USA Water Polo, NCSA is the actual official recruiting partner. And so after tonight's webinar, each of you will have a free NCSA profile if you so choose. You have the ability, like this screenshot here, to load up that information. So academic information, athletic information, all of your measurables, video footage. I'm sure, for my athletes that are listening here, this is going to be music to your ears. NCSA actually has an app as well, too. So if you're anything like my younger cousins in high school where they don't put their phone down more than maybe 20 minutes throughout the day, this can all be done right on the phone for you guys as well, too. So I always recommend, especially, specifically smaller programs that maybe don't have endless, recruiting budgets. A lot of programs are recruiting online, and what they're starting with first is your online athletic resume, especially if you're a student athlete like Abby that maybe is from the Midwest and want to explore a different part of the country. Those programs aren't getting on flights every single day, you guys, and traveling the
Especially with
country. Yeah, traveling the country to, multiple tournaments throughout the year. They are starting their online recruiting uh, via, either NCSA or emails and video footage. So you do want to make sure you're putting your best foot forward and having a solid foundation to work off of. As we transition, I want to talk a little bit about making yourself recruit ready. Okay. And so I'm talking about just an online, athletic resume. What this is going to do is this is going to create greater exposure to college coaches nationwide. Okay. We know, there aren't a ton of Midwest programs, right? A lot of them are, coast to coast. So if you're a Midwest kid that is looking for opportunities, this is going to create greater exposure for you. Having an online athletic resume and profile means easier connections to college coaches. If you're looking at NCSA or utilizing NCSA, the college match technology to really kind of figure out where you may be a best fit athletically and academically will also be something that can be helpful for you. And then really just making sure that you're staying convenient when you're managing your recruiting process. And so having everything in kind of a one-stop shop area. So as I've shared on the right side of the screen here, what's so important is that you're keeping your athletic resume up to date. And so what you accomplish freshman year to what you accomplish junior and senior year could be drastically different. I mean, Abby, if you think back to when you were a freshman in high school, by the time that you completed your senior year, were you the same player?
No.
Absolutely not, right? You're probably growing, you're developing, you may have picked up, new tricks and new habits, whatever it may be. So if you're trying to put your best foot forward and showcase that to college coaches, that does actually need to be referenced on your athletic resume as well too. Okay? You'll see here there's different ways to load in multiple video footage on the NCSA profiles, you guys. If you have YouTube links, you can actively add those in as well. You can add multiple transcripts, you can add in test scores, all of your academic accomplishments year in and year out. So for my parents that are listening, right, I know all of us at some point are going through and having to update those resumes, whether it's for an interview or just, to keep it readily available because you don't know what's going to happen. Same thing for you guys that are listening in on the athlete side. You want to make sure that you're keeping everything accurate. With that being said, Abby, I mean, what would your recommendation be as far as updating video footage? I mean, how frequently are college coaches looking for video footage?
I would say just before, like, if you have new video, updating it before like big tournaments, especially like right, seeing when you get any kind of, like, if you're going to email a college coach, maybe send them a link to your video. Just make sure it's not, from 2 years ago. Make sure
Mhm.
it's somewhat recent. I know my college coach liked to he likes to watch an entire game rather than just highlights. He's like, I know with highlights, it's like, they're showing me, oh, this shot that they made or this steal or whatever. But with an entire game, they can sort of see, you know, how you are as a player, you know, how you are as a full defensive and offensive player. And so you
Yeah.
could ask the coach, like, hey, here's like, or you could have both as an option. Here's a link to my full game that I played, and here's the date of it, or here are some of my highlights, you know, and you could have both ready, because I know depending on the coach, they might want something different.
That's a great point on the mixture side of things. I think, being able to cater to what college coaches are looking for. And this will be a great segue in for us to talking a little bit about what you should be doing as an underclassman compared to what you should be doing as an upperclassman. I mean, I think every 6, 8 months, guys, is the golden, kind of goal for updating video footage. And I only say that because bodies change, right? We grow, we develop. You may be getting faster, stronger, or you may have changed up your style of play. So anything that warrants, major milestones, I think are great to go ahead and showcase on your profile. But with all of that being said, as an underclassman, for those that are listening in, update your profile or your athletic resume as much as you can. Video footage, transcripts at this age are the most important. Researching schools from all division levels is really going to be key at this point in time as well too, especially prior to your tournaments. You could probably look at, past tournaments and get a little bit of a ballpark figure as far as what were some of the past programs that had attended some of the tournaments and stuff, and kind of get a little bit of an idea there. You should be completing recruiting questionnaires. I know some always have questions on where can I find recruiting questionnaires. The athletic website, the water polo website of that school should have that recruiting questionnaire loaded up for you. Okay. Super easy. It's, a myriad of questions that it's going to ask you both academically and athletically. But by completing a recruiting questionnaire, what you're actually doing is you're storing your information in that program's database. So you're actually more inclined to get updates from that program. You're more inclined to possibly get camp information or camp invites. So especially as a freshman, sophomore, you guys, you should be completing those recruiting questionnaires. And then more so than ever, especially as an underclassman, really be on top of your A game when it comes to social media. Follow coaches, follow college water polo programs on Twitter and Instagram. Those are some of the best ways to get a bird's eye view into the program. And you can really learn a lot, from social media as well. Vice versa, you can have the opportunity to really build out your, resume and kind of your, online opportunity via Twitter, and Instagram as well too, because believe it or not, college coaches are searching Instagram and Twitter and Facebook accounts. So while you're active on social media, it can help in recruiting, but it also can hurt. So you do want to make sure that what you're posting out there, for the world to see, is going to be something that, your family would be okay with, proud of. It makes sense as to, what kind of story you're trying to tell. So not to get too much into the weeds on that, but as an upperclassman, really what you're striving for at this point in time is the completion of your profile. So test scores, additional video footage, last measurables, NCAA eligibility number, whatever it may be. At this point in time, you should not only research schools from all division levels, but you should be actively emailing these programs prior to tournaments, and you should have back and forth communication with programs at this point in time, especially as we shared kind of the timeline of back half of sophomore year going into junior year. Your upperclassmen junior, senior year are really going to be key. Okay. When I talk about actively reaching out, it's sharing tournament schedules and details, updating them academically, both pre and post tournaments, updating them, how life is going if it's a program that you're actively in communication with. Maybe letting them know, what other extracurricular activities you're involved in. This is the time where these programs want to get to know you and build out that relationship, because the back half, of junior year, senior year, is really hopefully when you're going to be making some final decisions and narrowing down things. So just keep that in mind as well. Want to take a brief pause because I think we've got some questions potentially coming in. Oh, no, sorry. Yes, we are sending out the recording. Thanks, Abby, for highlighting that.
Another thing I wanted to add just about the profile
Yeah.
as well is college coaches will want to know your swimming times, just like for reference of how fast you are. I would have your 100 free and your 50 free swim times on there, even if you're not a swim team, high school swim teams or club swimmer. just have someone like, when you're, in season or in good shape, have someone record your times for those so you can put them on your profile, and then do it every, couple months, or every, once a semester or something, because that's going to be something that college coaches are definitely going to want to know, just for reference of like, okay, how, what's their swimming level at.
Yeah, that's a great point. And as you guys probably just saw in the visual that I shared, that's really front and center on your athletic resume as well too. So perfect transition, Abby, to talk a little bit about how college coaches use NCSA. So I've shared a little bit of a snapshot here. So we have technology for college coaches to utilize via NCSA as well too, where they can actively search for student athletes that fit criteria that they're looking for. So maybe it's minimum GPAs, maybe it's certain grad years, maybe it's a position that they're trying to backfill, whatever it may be. So there are very important aspects to having your profiles complete because college coaches are in here looking for that information. The other thing that I want to share is for ODPs and JOs in the spring and the summer. USA Water Polo utilizes Coach Packet, which is the digital recruiting booklet for college coaches. So it's so important that your athletic resumes via your NCSA profile are all up to date and have robust information, because that's exactly what college coaches want to see. So not only are they going to get the scheduling, they're going to get all of the roster information, but it's also a competitive edge to have your information loaded up on NCSA and have it up to date so that all of that information is put in front of those college coaches as well too. So you guys might have received some information on that. Just wanted to make a quick note, of what to expect this week and next week, and then, coming into the summer months as well too. But it's kind of where we're wrapping up here. Before the tournament, it's so important. Again, I talk a lot about building a foundation. Every good plan has a foundation, right? That's so important. And so what we really want to tackle and what we really want to think about is making or updating your target list. So really thinking about what's important to you, like Abby mentioned earlier: location, academics, size of school. Maybe it's the division level or the coach communication or your interest. I mean, just off the top of your head, Abby, what were some of the things that were important to you as you were making kind of your, final decision for college?
Mine was I kind of wanted to go to a smaller school where there were smaller classes, not one where you go sit in a lecture hall of, 100 people. That was just something that was really important to me. I knew academically I wanted to make sure it had the majors that I wanted. And I was familiar with where I ended up going because my older siblings went there, but I knew it had the majors I wanted. It was the sort of campus I liked.
Yeah.
I knew the coach that was there. I liked, the teammates or the team that I had met so far. So, and that's big as well with, if you end up getting to meet the team, like, but yeah, just researching the school, like just narrow it down, make it simple for yourself, narrow it down to, do I want to go to a big school or a small school? Do I want to make sure they have this major, or, a couple different majors that I might be interested in, that kind of thing. Just like
Yeah.
pick a couple things and just narrow them down.
And the biggest thing too is the last thing I'll say on this is that, not every college program is going to have everything on your checklist, right? There are going to be some gives and some takes, but there probably are some non-negotiables that you guys are thinking through, whether it is the location, maybe it's the financial aspect, maybe it's the extracurriculars that you could potentially be involved in. I used to work with student athletes that were adamant about going to a school that had a football program because they wanted, to be able to participate in tailgates and stuff. Um, Sounds crazy to some, but very, very important to others. And so I think, the point that I'm trying to make here is that each and every one of our recruiting journeys is different. And why I say that is because each and every one of your expectations and what you want for your college experience is yours. You have the opportunity to make it your own. And so as you're building out your target list, especially if you're just starting out building out your target list, strive for 10 plus schools, right? These are going to be where you're in the most realistic chance of getting in academically, athletically, but it's fitting financially, it's fitting socially. And then maybe you want to think about 5 dream schools, right? These are just the schools that, you've maybe seen on TV, or maybe you are, not athlete or academically qualified for, but it's a little bit of a shot there. And then lastly, you want to think about some safety schools, right? These are kind of your backup plans. If things don't work out, with X, Y, and Z, these are ones that we know we have in the hopper. We could be relatively satisfied with. They could still be a good fit, but they may not necessarily be your top choice. So for those that may be struggling with putting together a target list or maybe revamping your target list, hopefully these are a few tips that can kind of help you guys through that as well too. Okay. But again, before the tournament, it's so important to reach out to coaches prior. Um, Abby really nailed all of the aspects of this, piece here is being intentional, right? Abby, do you want to talk a little bit about something that you share with your athletes about being intentional and why it's important reaching out, prior to tournaments?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of athletes think like, "Oh, I'm going to go to this really high level tournament and coaches are going to watch me and be like, "Oh, wow, like they're going to be narrowed in on me and that's how I'm going to get exposure." But it's actually sort of backwards of that. Is like they come and there's so many well, a lot of times they come and, there's a lot of really high level, especially at an OD something like ODP where, you're talking about very high level athletes. A lot of them are handpicked
Hmm.
and so, yes, they're going to watch these very high level games, but really, they're going to create a schedule. They're not going to just willy nilly be like, oh, I'm going to go over here, go over here, go over here.
Absolutely.
They create a schedule based on who they're there to see specific people. So you want to get on their radar before the tournament even starts. Something like Junior Olympics, where there's multiple locations, there's multiple pools that it's being played at. There are, they have a busy tournament schedule and they do have specific people that they're going there to see. You want to get on their radar. You want to be one of those specific people. Something that so I coached at the Texas Junior Olympics this past summer, and something that came up pretty much every day we were there was the girls that I was coaching, they were always updating their coaches, like because the tournament schedules change, whether you win or lose, the next day is going to be dependent on that. So, hey, coach, just wanted to let you know this is my game time tomorrow. The next game after that is going to depend, blah, blah, blah. Just because, maybe they couldn't make this game, you want to keep updating them so they don't have to go through the whole confusing thing of the schedule that I could never figure out the entire tournament. So, you want to be updating them. Like if you've had communication and they're like, yes, I want to come see you play, make sure you're letting them know where you're going to be playing, when you're going to be playing. And then if they come to your game, just, make, if you can, I know that circumstances don't always allow this, it can be crazy before, after you want to be focused before a game. And then after you might have to do team stuff, but try to, if you can't go talk to them, shake their hand, say thank you for coming to my game. Try to at least send an email follow up and say, hey, I really appreciate you coming out. And then just get any feedback or anything. Yeah, anything you can just really thank them and just get any feedback you can kind of glean from, a college coach coming to your game. So
Great point, Abby. It's relationship building, right? And what Abby and I are talking about is, emailing these coaches are not going to happen overnight, right? Because you email them today is not mean that they're going to come, specifically to your game. It's about reaching out prior and having that opportunity to build those relationships. Abby hit the nail on the head as far as college programs. They are not just randomly showing up to the pool and trying to, watch games. They are coming specifically with a list because a lot of the times it's playing chess, right? Strategically matching those, pieces and trying to line things up with, what they need to jump the car and go to a different location. There's a lot of strategy behind it. So the earlier you can reach out, the more often you can reach out. Definitely keep that in mind. I will say this though, I always get this question, how often is too often to reach out? If you are a student athlete that can have communication with coaches via email, via phone calls, text message, and you've reached out two, three, four times over a few months span and you've never heard anything back, then I do recommend moving on, right? Because if that college program was interested, there would be back and forth communication. So the theory that I always operate off of is a 2 to 3 strike rule. Life happens, emails get missed. There are, coaches that are not great, as far as getting back, and we understand that that happens. But the golden rule of thumb is, again, if you're able to have communication with that program, you've reached out over a few months span, I even almost say 3, 4 times at this point in time, and you've just never heard anything back, then I do think it is time to move on and probably look at some programs that are going to show you that love back. Okay. Remember, it's about relationship building. Okay. Um, as far as just next steps in recruiting here, so after the tournament, like Abby alluded to, it's so important to not only just focus in on the pre-tournament, and sharing, schedule updates and all that good stuff during, but it's even more important after the tournament. And I always say that because some of that follow-up can be really critical. It can really show a coaching staff that you're very invested in their program. You want to keep the relationship, the communication open-ended. And so some tips that we want to share is after your, tournament, send a follow-up email or a thank you email if that coach that you invited out actually showed up to your game or you saw them in the stands. Be specific. Mention, how you performed, how the team performed, any major takeaways from the tournament. Um, it always doesn't just have to be athletic related too. You can let them know what's next for you and what you're working on. Maybe they gave you some feedback on your skills video and you got back in the pool and have been working on it for the last 2 months. And maybe you've got some new video footage to show them. So just know that it doesn't always have to be athletic related. You can share upcoming events, updated highlighter skills video, maybe a fun vacation if you're on that level with the coaching staff, about what's going on in your world, new class at school, how things are going academically. So all of that, are great points to reach out to. And then as I kind of close out here, we've really hit on it, but I want to hammer it home is that keep building the relationship and stay in communication. Okay. The more that you're, back and forth with emails, scheduling phone calls, those have the opportunity to lead to visits. Those have the opportunity to have a coaching staff actually let you know where you're at on their recruiting list and where you're at in the recruiting process with them. So while it's great to provide updates, it's even more important to follow up with questions because that keeps the dialogue ongoing and that allows for that communication back and forth as well too. Okay. Just a quick slide here to show you, a gauge of how college coaches are interested in you. I always think it's really interesting to kind of gauge where you're at in the process. Remember, we talked a little bit as underclassmen, recruiting questionnaires, camp invites are going to be critical as we transition more to that upperclassmen stage, emails from coaches, phone calls, and then ideally we're leading to that visit stage. So just a nice little visual, kind of a barometer of kind of where you're at, in the process as well. But what we want to do is I could talk water polo with Abby probably for another 2 hours, but I want to be conscious of everybody's time. So we want to take a minute to answer any questions that you guys have. I want to talk a little bit about next steps moving forward. So for those of you that have not already started your NCSA profiles, I do encourage you guys to scan the QR code below and schedule your recruiting assessment to start that process. Remember, for ODPs, for JOs, you want to have that athletic resume loaded up and you want to make sure you've got all of the necessary information in there for those college coaches. So by scanning that QR code, you'll take the next step there to talk about your recruiting journey. If you are already a member of NCSA or have a profile with NCSA, keep updating it, ladies and gentlemen. So important. Keep college coaches on their toes with that information. You want to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward, and how you do that is by keeping your information up to date for those coaches. Okay. I'm going to pause. I want to ask what questions you have. My contact information is here. Abby's contact information is here. If any of you guys, parents are club coaches or, have great relationships with your club coaches that may have questions, I encourage you to have them reach out to Abby, have them shoot an email, whatever it may be. Or if you just really have any questions about, the recruiting journey or the process as a whole, feel free to reach out to myself. My email address is there. I will be sending out a recording of tonight's webinar for you guys tomorrow. You'll have access to the PowerPoint, all the great, tips that we've shared tonight for you. And then as we continue throughout the year, we will provide additional webinars that are educational based for the USA Water Polo community. So be on the lookout for that as well too. But I will pause there. Feel free to use the chat box. Feel free to use the Q&A. Let me know if I need to go back to anything. But we're going to hang around here for a minute or so to answer your questions.
Paul, it is not too late.
Go ahead, Abby. Talk to them about your experience.
It is It is absolutely not too late. We work in recruiting, so we put emphasis on, starting early because we want you guys to have the best recruiting process, the best, most successful recruiting process, but it's absolutely not too late. Thank you for coming, William.
Great questions tonight, guys. You too. Super interactive. I appreciate it. We know it's been a busy week leading into ODPs, so you guys have been rock stars
at ODP.
Anyone else got any more questions? I know we've been super interactive throughout, so we may have gotten to all of them. So great to meet you, Paul. Awesome, guys.
Will coaches depend their choices off your play style? Their play style.
Such as your position.
Oh, yes. I would say it depends. Like, it depends on if yes and no. Like, for example, I was an attacker in high school because I played with boys and I was never big enough to be a 2-meter. But then when I went in college, I started playing on the women's team and I became a 2-meter. So my coach kind of recruited me because I was fast and I could shoot from the outside. But then I eventually, like, it sort of changed during my college experience there. So, like, for example, a good example of this would be like a goalie. They, usually they'll want to have an A and a B goalie. And so they'll kind of figure out when one is graduating and then one they want, 2 at a time kind of a thing. So it's like, if you're a goalie or a 2-meter or 2-meter defender, something like that, and they're specifically looking for that, then they might look at you specifically for your position, but it kind of, yeah. But if you're more versatile too, that's really helpful. And I think because you can kind of learn and change and grow once you're in college. I know I did a lot. Likelihood of getting selected as a walk-on during a tryout.
Great question.
A walk-on during a tryout. I would say it really depends. Like I said,
I would say also, Christine, a really great question would be to ask the program what their history of, selecting walk-ons during a tryout would be. I think that's a great question that really is applicable to a lot of sports across the board.
Yeah.
But that would be one of the questions that I would definitely ask is, what has been the likelihood over the last few years? Are there any stats, that the program could share? Because I think that'll give you a better idea as well, too.
Yeah.
Great question, Christine. Such an interactive group. This has been awesome. And thank you, Abby, for all your great info. I'm glad that you were able to jump on, and I know your kiddos are probably super lucky to have you in their corner, just providing some great information day in and day out too.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course.
Thank you guys all for coming.